Hey there, everyone. If you're like me and you've been wondering what's the point in getting a court order to block access to customer data on a dark web after the breach has happened, then this video is for you. As you be aware, there's a number of companies that after they've had a data breach have been going to the courts and getting what's called an injunction that allows them to put in place a legal declaration that no one is to go to the dark website to access the data. When I first saw this happen recently, I thought it was a pretty naive and pointless exercise. It's not like the cybercriminals are going to take heed of that court order. And so what are they actually trying to do? What I did was put my systems thinking hat on and go and have a think about what could be the potential reasons other than what I originally thought was the purpose of organizations doing this. And so I went out and did a little bit of research about all the different perspectives that there might be on this sort of court order, and then started to build that picture, which I want to take you through now. And hopefully you'll be able to understand the different perspectives that are involved in what seems like a very simple approach. So anytime that you see two or more events happening, that indicates that there's a pattern. And so this systems thinking iceberg shows you the steps that you need to go through to try and assess maybe what's happening behind these incidents. Often we just focus on the surface level events, but once we see two or three of these happening in a row, which we have seen with these court injunctions being issued, you start to see that there's a pattern forming. And once that pattern forming happens, then it's a matter of going and looking at what might be the structures that are causing this pattern, enabling this pattern. And then you go a little bit deeper and look at what's the mental models that might be behind an organization or a system adopting this structure or building this structure to try and drive these patterns for a purpose. What you have is a situation where there's a data breach, sensitive data has been exfiltrated and is now exposed on the dark web, publicly available, and they usually threaten to say they'll release the full data if ransom's not paid within a certain period of time. So what we're seeing now is this pattern where organizations, as part of their incident response, are going and getting these legal injunctions, which is a situation where they plead their case to the court. The court then issues these injunctions and says that there's a legal boundary, if you like, around this data and that people are not allowed to go and access it. And so what we need to do to understand the reasoning behind this is look at all the different perspectives that are involved in this data breach, the data that's now available, and what their views might be on the issuing of the court injunction and how it benefits them or not. So with systems thinking, and especially DSRP theory, we look at the perspectives pattern, which is made up of two elements. There's the view, that's what you're looking at, and then it's the point, which is who is looking at it. That can be something with eyes, like people, or it can be conceptual, like a financial, an economic, or a legal perspective. If we then go and look at all of the perspectives that might have a view on this legal injunction and take the time to understand what their point of view is, we might get a better understanding of what they're trying to achieve by doing this. So let's go through and have a look at each of the different stakeholders that I've identified here and understand what their perspective might be and what their thoughts on the court injunction could be. First, if we look at the breached company, they see court injunctions as a multipurpose protective measure. And there's a number of things that we're going to step through here that will hopefully illustrate why there's a lot of different reasons behind asking for one of these court injunctions. Let's look at the cybercriminals. What are they going to think of when they see that this legal injunction's been issued? They're pretty much going to see it as an irrelevant legal formality. So hackers would view this with a certain amount of contempt. They'd probably see them as ineffective legal mechanisms that have no jurisdiction over where they're operating from, particularly if they're outside of Australian borders. Then obviously there's the breach victims. They're probably going to see this as a counterproductive measure what is this actually going to do for us? From their perspective, it might give them some psychological comfort that action's being taken to prevent people from accessing their data, but really it doesn't stop the bad guys in their previous scenario from doing anything with it. So they might see it as fairly limited in what it can actually do. If we then take a look at the general public may have a view on this that it's something that organisations are trying to do and the courts are trying to do to improve the situation, to limit the amount of access that's being provided to the data. And they may also alternatively see it as a bit of a naive approach as well, and what's the benefits going to be if it's already been breached. Then we look at the perspective of media organisations. They're most likely going to see this as a constraint on their ability to report. And it's just another legal barrier that limits their ability to do detailed reporting, potentially conflicting with public interest and transparency, while imposing some legal risk against the media organisations for accessing or publishing information related to those stolen records. Then we look at the regulators. The regulators are going to see this as an evidence of response efforts. Although the data's been breached, the regulations still say that you need to do your best efforts to try and limit access and limit the impact that data breach. And regulators may see this as a way of organisations demonstrating evidence that they've been doing the best they can. Yes, the breach has happened, but we've tried to limit the access to that data as much as possible. And they're potentially looking to influence decisions about any civil penalties while still working through the whole end-to-end process of dealing with this data breach. Then you've got the company directors. They may see the court injunction as a sort of liability shield. Again, it's evidence of due care and diligence being taken that may protect them from personal liability under the Corporations Act and demonstrate that they took all reasonable steps in response to the data breach. Insurance companies are going to have a perspective on this as well. They're the risk bearers financially from these events, and they may see it as the organisation remaining compliant with policy requirements. It's again further evidence that the organisation has pursued all available legal remedies potentially required by their policies, and therefore strengthening the company's position in any dispute around the coverage of their policy. Then we've got the cyber professionals. You'll see a lot of these comments about how it's just like a thoughts and prayers response. And it's almost as though we're saying the horse is bolted, what's the point? And it's the cybersecurity professionals that often take a very limited perspective on these breaches in terms of what a legal injunction might be able to do. Then we've got the legal system itself. Obviously, data breaches are a matter that require legal intervention, and courts would view these cases through the legal frameworks of confidentiality and harm prevention, and granting these injunctions, despite the limited practical effectiveness they may have, is still something that they need to do if they have the ability to put these legal restrictions in place to try and do the best they can with the situation that's in front of them. And then you've got the shareholders of the companies. They're obviously going to be looking at a court injunction as a risk mitigation measure, similar to some of the other organisational stakeholders, a demonstration that management's taking all possible steps to protect the company value and reducing liability exposure and reputational damage, and that they've done some form of due diligence as part of that response. Then we've potentially got the class action lawyers. They're the legal representatives for the affected groups. They would see an injunction possibly as a defensive legal maneuver. They would see it as a corporate attempt to build a narrative against any potential future class actions that may happen. And it's just creating evidence for the organisation of the mitigation efforts that might reduce any potential damages. And then finally, you've got the breach company. As I said, this is a multi-purpose measure that they're taking as part of this. There's the company seeing it as a strategic tool that serves multiple purposes. fulfilling Privacy Act obligations, protecting against class actions, satisfying any requirements their insurers may have, demonstrating compliance to regulators, managing that media coverage, ensuring that they're doing every possible thing to protect the data that's unfortunately been breached, and then providing protection for directors and officers of the company. And given that they provide a number of potential benefits to organisations far greater than what I had originally conceived of, I predict that we'll start to see these as part of an organisation's incident response toolkit. No doubt the pattern will continue to emerge. More organisations, I think, are going to adopt these given the number of benefits that they have, and no doubt we'll continue to see these into the future. And like me, after seeing this information, it's probably a good time to ask yourself, do I need to update my mental model on how these court injunctions are being used, and how does that change the way I think about them? Let me know what you think in the comments below. It'd be great to hear from you if you found this useful, and it's another demonstration of how systems thinking can help you understand more of what's happening within the system, but how the different perspectives within the system can see something through a different lens and arrive at a different conclusion. Thank you, and I'll see you online again soon.